On the day of her wedding, Amani Thorne faced a crushing humiliation from her spiteful mother-in-law right in front of all her relatives. "You're nothing but the gardener's kid," the woman spat with venom. "My boy deserves someone from his own circle, not some penniless outsider like you, who has no place in our lives." Um, Yet she could never have foreseen the twist that would unfold several months down the line. Amani Thorne gently adjusted the pleats of her modest bridal dress. Her fingers shook slightly as she gazed at her image in the mirror of the modest chapel's changing area, where she'd been abandoned to prepare alone. The material felt gentle against her skin, though it lacked the luxury of satin or couture labels. It was a garment crafted by her own mother, with endless care and affection. "This will do," she repeated to herself silently. Still, beneath the surface, the stark divide between her humble background and Elias Aworth's privileged one pressed down on her like a burden she couldn't shake. She found herself replaying the sneers and disdain from his relatives that had piled up over the recent weeks. Her dad, Marcus, a rugged fellow whose palms bore the scars of decades tending the earth, glanced in from the threshold. Pride lit his face, though a flicker of concern lingered in his gaze. "You look stunning, sweetheart," he murmured, stepping inside cautiously to avoid creasing his outfit. "A touch faded, but spotless." Amani managed a weak grin, touched by his effort to bolster her spirits. She realized he'd stretched every resource to back her decision, despite his own lingering uncertainties. Yet how could she relax with Elias's folks, Randall and Vivian Amesworth, planted among the attendees beyond the walls, openly rejecting her presence? Her devotion to Elias burned fierce and true, but the harsh truths of their situation grew more oppressive with each passing day. "Appreciate it, Pop," she answered, clasping his hand warmly. "Still, I keep dwelling on what's waiting just outside." Marcus exhaled deeply, drawing nearer to rest a palm on her arm. "What counts is your bond with him, the rest. You'll tackle it side by side." Amani dipped her head in agreement, even as the sharp barbs from Randall and Vivian Amesworth, Elias's parents, replayed in her mind, phrases they'd hurled repeatedly. "She's merely the gardener's offspring," Vivian had declared, as though it sealed her fate. "He deserves a match, a real peer," their social circle had whispered in agreement. Elias, though, had stood firm without a second's hesitation. He'd shielded her every time. He'd picked her, no question. That loyalty fueled her resolve, drowning out the echoes of judgment still ringing in her ears. The hush of the crowd outside signaling their seats meant the ceremony loomed close. Her pulse quickened, and she drew in a steadying breath to steady her nerves. Marcus, picking up on her jitters, gave her fingers another reassuring press. "Elias adores you. Let that be your focus right now." Imani beamed through misty eyes, brimming with feeling, and affirmed with a nod. She trusted his words, yet the sting of judgmental stares awaiting her beyond the entrance loomed large. Out by the altar, Elias positioned himself, fighting to conceal his inner turmoil. He anticipated the storm ahead. He grasped the scheme his parents, particularly his dad Randall, had hatched. Randall had laid it out bluntly behind closed doors. "Wed that woman," he'd growled, tone steady and icy. "And you're cutting ties with us for good. No inheritance, Elias. This is final." Those threats still buzzed in his thoughts. Vivian, his mom, had approached it with more finesse, yet her scheming intent shone through. "Elias, imagine all your ambitions within reach," she'd cooed in a gentle tone. "But choosing her means hardship. She's no match for you. She doesn't grasp our lifestyle. Don't sabotage your path with this error." Elias refused to budge. His heart belonged to Amani, and their connection felt real, far deeper than the shallow alliances his kin might approve. He understood that wealth and status paled against the passion he held for her. Even so, their opposition shadowed him relentlessly. As the chapel entrance swung wide and Imani stepped into view, every doubt evaporated. Elias locked eyes on her, and the world faded away. She grounded him, the force driving him to rebel against it all. Imani advanced deliberately down the aisle. The glint of unshed tears in her gaze captured the whirlwind of sentiments they both carried. Up front, Randall eyed his son with icy detachment. Vivian, masking her defeat with poise, kept her chin lifted, though her contempt for the bride hung plain for all nearby to see. Imani sensed each footfall as leaden, but connecting with Elias's stare brought an inner peace. There stood her refuge, her beloved. The bond hit her so profoundly that the crowd's critical glances, cloaked in courteous facades, slipped from her notice. Arriving at the platform, Elias clasped her palms in his, offering a soft squeeze. "We'll face it as one, Imani," he breathed low. She agreed with a bob of her head, fighting back the sobs. She recognized the road ahead would test them. The minister kicked off the proceedings, but prior to the pivotal exchange of promises, Randall rose abruptly from his chair. Whispers rippled through the assembly. Elias's brow furrowed, all too aware Randall couldn't resist seizing the chance to deliver his parting words. "Pardon me, Pastor," he cut in, breaking the flow of the proceedings. "Yet I believe it's my responsibility to clarify for all those present the significance of today's events." The bewildered minister halted, glancing toward Elias for direction. Randall, however, pressed on without pause. Turning to the assembly, he spoke in a resonant, commanding tone. "My son Elias is tying the knot with Imani, daughter of the gardener. I'm not aiming to offend, but I must highlight the implications this holds for our lineage." Murmurs intensified as eyes turned to Imani, some offering compassion, others brimming with disapproval. "Elias has opted to disregard all we've sacrificed for him, all we've constructed as a unit, in favor of wedding someone evidently beneath his station." Imani's breath caught sharply, but before she could respond, Elias released her grasp and advanced. "Stop right there, Father," he declared, his tone resolute and laced with restrained fury. Randall appeared unmoved by the rebuke. He regarded his son with an icy detachment familiar only to intimates. "I'm afraid, my boy, that if you proceed, you'll forfeit your legacy, your role in our circle at all. No reversals allowed." Silence enveloped the space. Attendees froze, anticipating Elias's reply. They sensed this instant would alter their world irrevocably. Elias remained rooted before his father, the impact of those declarations bearing down like an avalanche. What had buzzed with hushed exchanges now felt like an endless chasm, echoing solely with Randall's ultimatum. "You'll surrender it all." Imani, at his side, watched anxiously, her pulse racing, gaze pleading for his glance, some gesture of comfort. Yet Elias grappled with a surge of fury and sorrow. Randall, upright still, eyed his offspring with a sharp appraising stare, underscoring his dominance in the hall. What escaped him was Elias's prior resolve, set well before this hour. "Father," Elias uttered at last, his words measured yet steadfast. "I grasp its importance to you. I recognize your visions for me, the paths you've long urged. But this is my path, and I'm selecting Imani out of deep affection. With her, true joy awaits." Randall's brow knit, dismissing the sentiment. "Affection, is it?" he sneered derisively. "Elias, affection won't swell your coffers. It won't unlock opportunities. It won't command the esteem required to expand our dominion. Do you truly believe with her at your flank, you can claim the destiny we've shaped?" Vivian, Elias's mother, stayed in her seat, observing the unfolding with a weary acceptance tinged by quiet grief. She understood retreat was impossible. Though she yearned for choices favoring their kin, The hurt unfolding pierced her. "Randall, enough," Vivian murmured, seeking to ease the tension. "Not here, not now." But Randall ignored her, intent on driving home the cost of defiance. Elias, jaw set tight, met his father's stare head-on. The hush in the chamber rang oppressively. All witnesses tensed, realizing this transcended mere discord. It was an unspoken battle for Elias's essence. "Your wealth and status aren't prerequisites for my fulfillment," Elias pressed on, his resolve hardening. "I've come to see your provisions as a lavish prison." He pivoted to Amani, clasping her fingers tenderly. "She grants me liberty. She's everything for my wholeness." Those declarations nearly drew tears from Amani. Elias had ever been her anchor. Now confronting his own sire on her behalf, she fathomed the depth of his commitment. The devotion he voiced ran profound, enduring, a vow for shared tomorrows despite headwinds. Randall balled his hands, evident in his irritation at such rebellion. From Elias's youth, he'd pictured a triumphant path, triumphs, authority, helm of the enterprise, elevating their legacy further. Yet that labor now dissolved amid his view, undone by a woman he deemed bereft of worth. "You're courting your gravest error," Randall hissed, eyeing Elias like an outsider. "She'll drag you to downfall, and when ruin strikes, seek no aid from us." The harshness prompted Amani to bow her head. Elias, undeterred, gripped her palm more firmly, vowing against his father's assault on their hard-won bond. "Then no return beckons," Elias countered calmly. Though his chest thundered, he appended, "If living with her meant forfeiting all the rest, then so be it." Randall shook his head in disbelief, stepping away slowly and letting the microphone slip from his grasp, utterly vanquished in his bid to dominate the moment. Silence enveloped the room once more, though now it stemmed not from the clash between father and son, but from the sheer shock rippling through the attendees at the bold scene unfolding before them. It was uncommon to witness a figure like Elias, so boldly challenging his influential lineage. At last, Vivian rose from her chair. She approached her son, her gaze brimming with conflicting feelings. She had wished to avoid this turning point, yet there was little left she could influence. Halting before him, she glanced fleetingly at Amani before fixing her eyes on Elias again. "Elias," she murmured gently, her voice laced with restrained sorrow. "You understand the implications for your life ahead, right? You realize we can't proceed if you take this route." Elias met her stare, aware that her words flowed from a mother's deep affection, yet also from a woman ensnared by unyielding societal norms and traditions. "Yes, Mom," he answered more gently, "but this is the path I choose. Imani is my true family now." Vivian inclined her head, offering no further words. She recognized that her son's choice was set, and though it wounded her deeply, she refused to resist any longer. She cast a sorrowful glance at her husband, who had retreated to his place, broken in his effort to steer events. As Vivian made her way back to her seat, the proceedings resumed, even as an odd, fraught tension lingered in the air. Elias and Imani recited their promises, fully conscious that their shared journey would prove challenging. Yet, clasping hands and gazing into one another's eyes, they understood that their bond, the sacrifices they had endured, outweighed any wealth or legacy. "I love you," Elias breathed, while sliding the ring onto her finger, his utterance carrying a vow for what lay ahead. Imani, tears glistening in her eyes, returned a tender smile that reassured her amid all the turmoil. They belonged right there. The rite concluded amid hesitant claps and faint whispers. The assembly recognized that the spectacle they had observed transcended a mere union. It represented defiance, a bold affirmation of devotion that scorned authority and riches. As Elias and Imani proceeded toward the doorway, fingers intertwined, they grasped that while obstacles might crowd their future, they had already triumphed in the vital struggle, forging their own fate, no matter the price. Stepping beyond the church's entrance, they sensed that united, no trial could overwhelm them. The initial months post-ceremony unfolded like a reverie for Elias and Imani. For all they had abandoned, they possessed one another, which initially felt ample. Their rented space in a humble district exuded coziness, brimming with affection and optimism. Imani tended to its adornment with straightforward yet intimate flair, infusing each nook with her spirit. Elias, on the other hand, labored relentlessly, pursuing fresh prospects to construct their existence free from his kin's looming influence. Still, this tranquility proved short-lived. The early warnings surfaced when Elias detected that avenues once readily accessible now barred him. Firms from his prior collaborations ignored his outreach. Appointments that had come effortlessly became unattainable. Initially, he dismissed it as happenstance or the expected shift after severing family ties. Yet he quickly discerned a darker force at work. One afternoon, following a fruitless discussion, Elias lingered solo in a cafe, studying his image in the glass. Overwhelmed and weary, he sensed the burden of opposing his father truly bearing down. Then his cell buzzed. It was Trevor, a longtime ally of the family who had served at his father's firm. Trevor's demeanor sounded grave, tinged with sympathy. "Elias, I reached out so you'd learn this directly from me, not through others," Trevor explained, his tone hushed. "Your dad has reached out to all the key players. He's ensured no ally or esteemed business will extend you an opportunity. He's warned that anyone backing you or Imani will clash with him head-on." Elias's gut twisted. His gut. He knew his father wielded immense sway, but he hadn't foreseen such extremes. "Is this pure spite?" Elias inquired, though inwardly he already suspected the truth. Trevor hesitated, as if weighing his response. "It's beyond mere grudge. He aims to draw you home, but under his rules. He claims it all mends if you abandon Imani and rejoin the fold." Elias gripped the table edge, a surge of helpless fury swelling within. He perceived his father's view as a mere contest of wills, yet another ploy to dominate. But this wasn't a transaction. It concerned his existence, his bond with Imani, his devotion. "That won't occur, Trevor. I'll never abandon Imani," Elias declared. His voice, he shook with barely restrained fury. Whatever actions he took, it wouldn't change a thing. "I get it, but watch your step, Elias," Trevor warned, his voice turning more serious. "He's dead set on ruining every chance you get, and I suspect this is only the start." Elias ended the call, as if the floor had vanished beneath his feet. He was aware that confronting his dad would bring repercussions, yet he hadn't foreseen them reaching such extremes. Elias, someone used to carving out his own path, now found himself ensnared in a tangle beyond his grasp. He understood that his father held the leverage to tarnish his standing in the corporate realm, and that threat was already sabotaging his ability to provide for his family. That evening, when he got back home, Imani greeted him like usual, her face warm yet etched with worry. But this time, Imani's expression couldn't brighten Elias's mood. He dropped onto the couch in silence, his posture sagging, eyes distant. "What's wrong, Elias?" Imani inquired gently, settling next to him. Elias met her eyes, and after ages, words escaped him. She could sense the strain already, the finances dwindling, prospects fading away. Admitting that his father orchestrated it all only deepened his sense of powerlessness. "Dad's ensured no one in his sphere will hire me," he admitted at last, tone lifeless. Imani regarded him quietly for a beat, processing the implications. She was aware Randall could stoop to ugly lengths, but wrapping her head around such malice toward his own child was tough. So what does he expect? Imani pressed, even though the response was obvious. He expects me to ditch you, to return and follow his script like before. Elias exhaled sharply, laced with resentment. He promises to restore it all if I walk away, that I could claim the future he's always envisioned for me. A tightness gripped Imani's gut. This wasn't the initial occasion she'd questioned whether their bond was derailing Elias's world. She recognized the sacrifices he'd made for her sake, and silently, she dreaded the day the load might overwhelm him. Yet as their gazes locked, she spotted that unyielding resolve in Elias's eyes, the very spark that had captured her heart initially. Elias, I won't beg you to keep forfeiting it all on my account, Imani murmured, scarcely audible. Elias stared at her, stunned she'd entertained such a notion. He clasped her hand with resolve, as though his father's threats might yank her from his side. This isn't you demanding anything, it's my choice. I picked you, and I'd pick you over and over 1,000 times. His words broke slightly, yet his stare held steady. He won't triumph. I won't abandon you, Imani. Tears traced Imani's face, born not of sorrow, but from the devotion and resolve Elias revealed right then. Still, they both recognized the road ahead was murky, with Randall's influence relentlessly dogging them. The ensuing weeks proved tougher still. Funds were evaporating, and each slammed door amplified Elias's frustration. He scoured for jobs in every corner, but the whispers had circulated. Elias, the defiant offspring, was now persona non grata, even in spots untouched by his family's reach. His reputation spelled risk. Imani pitched in as best she could, yet her talents and network fell short of sustaining them. One afternoon, as Elias hunched at the modest kitchen table, sifting through scant job leads, the phone buzzed once more. Not Trevor this round. It was his father. You realize this impasse isn't necessary, Elias, Randall stated, his tone slick yet laced with the icy command he'd long imposed. We can revert to normalcy, just opt for the sensible path. Elias clutched the receiver tightly. Fury surged within, though he forced composure. Sensible by your standards, father. Not mine. Not what my heart dictates. I'm staying with Imani. Randall hesitated, as if gauging his next move before pressing on. Fine then, onward with this standoff. Let's observe your endurance without resources. When choices dwindle, you'll know my door's open. Elias disconnected, more broken than before. His father showed no signs of yielding, but neither would he. The pressure, however, was mounting unbearably. Imani entered the kitchen just then, noting Elias's expression. That was him, right? She ventured, blending concern with defeat. Elias dipped his head, speechless. He rose and drew her into a fierce embrace. Imani leaned against his torso, and in that instant, they grasped that more than their affection hung in the balance. It was their fortitude against a relentless force bent on driving them apart. Yet as Elias softly ran his fingers through Imani's locks, a truth dawned on him. His father might strip away all else, but not the one vital piece. Days rolled on, and the challenges only intensified for Elias and Imani. Finances were tighter than ever before, and job prospects for Elias were disappearing at a breakneck speed. Yet, right in the heart of that turmoil, a piece of news landed that would transform their world completely. One afternoon, as Elias was off searching for work, Imani perched in the tiny bathroom of their place, clutching a pregnancy test. Her pulse raced wildly. The outcome was unmistakable. She was expecting. A whirlwind of emotions churned within her. There was the overwhelming delight of impending motherhood, countered by the dread of how it would complicate their existing struggles. When Elias got back, drained and ashen from yet another fruitless search, he spotted Imani on the couch, eyes brimming with tears. But these weren't from sorrow this time, puzzled and concerned. Elias hurried over and dropped to his knees before her. "What's going on, love?" he inquired softly. Imani clasped his hands and offered a faint, watery grin. "I'm pregnant, Elias." Time froze for Elias in that instant. His thoughts scrambled to absorb the revelation. A baby, their child. Even with the mess enveloping their daily existence, this announcement sparked a glow he hadn't known in ages. Gradually, his lips curved into a grin, and moisture welled up in his eyes as well. "Is that true?" he whispered, voice cracking with feeling. "We're becoming parents." Imani gave a nod. Right then, Elias pulled her into a fierce embrace, allowing their happy tears to flow without restraint. After months of gloom, a spark of light pierced through at last. That unborn little one, whom they hadn't even encountered, already provided fresh motivation to push forward. Still, the harsh truth crept back in quickly. The infant's birth would escalate their demands, and they realized they needed to hustle and secure stability, and pronto. That's when Imani recalled a cherished ability she'd always loved, crafting unique cakes and sweets. Imani had picked up baking as a child, assisting her mom in their humble kitchen setup. It brought her genuine pleasure, and had impressed plenty of folks who'd sampled her creations. In that instant, she figured this knack might just be their solution. "Elias," she ventured one evening over their meal, "I've got an idea. I could try vending cakes. It's not a fortune, but posting them online might bring in some cash." He regarded her attentively. He was well aware of Imani's baking prowess, though the notion of turning it into earnings hadn't crossed his mind. "You reckon?" he responded, though visions of its promise were already forming. "I could manage the drop-offs, and we might set up a profile to showcase them." Imi beamed with approval at his support. That evening, they burned the midnight oil, sketching out a strategy. Using his rudimentary tech skills, Elias whipped up a basic social media spot to share pics of the treats Imani started whipping up. Meanwhile, she tinkered with fresh flavors and toppings, aiming to deliver something standout. The initial weeks dragged with minimal action. They moved a few orders sporadically, handing them to nearby buyers who'd stumbled on their page. Elias zipped around on his bike for transport since a vehicle was out of reach. It didn't amount to a windfall at the outset, but each trip back brought a grin to his face. "Folks are raving about your goodies," Elias would exclaim with zeal. One customer swore today they were the finest ever. Imani, worn out from her pregnancy and endless kitchen stints, sensed they were at last carving a path to progress. Each sale boosted her assurance. Their cramped kitchen apartment had morphed into an impromptu baking hub, dusted with flour and granules of sugar, infused with the inviting scent of baking confections in every nook. One day, as Elias dropped off an order to a steady patron, a sharply dressed guy lingering at the door of a towering structure, he drew the man's notice. The fellow, eyeing the cake container Elias carried with evident curiosity, stepped closer. "Those treats yours?" the man queried, flashing a warm grin. "Actually, they're my wife's," Elias answered amiably. "I just do the runs." The man dipped his head, scrutinizing the package. "I manage for a coffee chain," he explained, offering his name as David, overseer for a prominent area food outfit. "We're scouting unique items to feature at our spots. Your presentation looks top-notch. Care if we test them out at the flagship shop? Should they suit us, we might arrange steady provisions from you." Elias stood stunned briefly. Here was a genuine break. After all their hardships, was this the breakthrough they'd craved? "Absolutely," he managed at last, a rush of thrill surging through him. "I'll prepare a larger batch for next week." That afternoon, upon returning home, Elias could hardly hold back his thrill. "Imani, you won't believe what happened." "Randall," he announced, bursting through the door of their apartment. "A supervisor from a coffee shop franchise is eager to try your pastries. This might just be a massive break for us." Imani stared at him in astonishment, her eyes widening. "Seriously?" she questioned, as though doubting her ears. Elias confirmed with a nod, pulling her into a warm embrace. "We're making this happen, Imani. It could be the turning point we've been hoping for." That evening, as Elias and Imani held each other close on their modest shared mattress, a renewed sense of positivity washed over them, the first in ages. They understood the path ahead remained challenging, yet a glimmer of possibility had ignited, something absent until now. Most importantly, they were tackling it side by side. The next week, Imani baked her finest treats, while Elias made sure the presentation was flawless. They transported the goods to the franchise's central location, where David, the supervisor, was struck by both the exceptional taste and the inspiring backstory. Just a few days afterward, the life-altering phone call arrived. "Your pastries are fantastic," David declared. "We'd like to sign a deal for regular weekly shipments from you." Elias and Imani were stunned. After endless hardships and compromises, this marked their initial true chance to thrive. They were finally crafting a foundation of their own, one that neither Randall nor anyone else could strip away. As Imani ran her hand over her increasingly rounded abdomen, with Elias gazing at her in adoration and satisfaction, they realized that amid all the obstacles, they'd triumphed in the greatest fight, committing to one another and confronting whatever fate brought. And so, with visions of a brighter tomorrow for their family, the period after securing the deal with the coffee franchise ushered in a profound shift for Elias and Imani's world. Gradually, requests multiplied, transforming their humble side effort into a thriving enterprise. Imanas, her pregnancy now quite visible, devoted extended periods in the workspace inventing fresh flavors and guaranteeing each dessert's excellence. At the same time, Elias, ever dependable, oversaw shipments, organization, and started overseeing the bookkeeping and agreements spurred by the suite's rising fame. Yet prosperity arrived with its share of hurdles. The demands were wearing Imani down, and approaching the pregnancy's end left her utterly drained. One afternoon, as the workload piled up while she leaned over the workspace frosting a pastry for an upcoming order, a sudden ache pierced her lower back, halting her in place. She inhaled deeply, attempting to steady herself, but the discomfort persisted. That's when Elias entered, arms loaded with a hefty crate of ingredients, and upon noticing Imani's strained look, he let it all crash to the floor. "Everything all right?" he inquired, hurrying to her side. Imani forced a grin to ease his mind, but the twinge made it impossible to fake. "It's probably just the little one. He's been active all day," she explained. Though her unease was clear, Elias regarded her with deep apprehension. He recognized that despite Imani's remarkable resilience, her well-being demanded a pause. Dropping to one knee next to her, he clasped her hand softly. "Imani, it's time you took a real break. You've pushed yourself too far," he urged, his voice gentle yet resolute. She gave a faint shake of her head. "The orders are stacking up, Elias. We can't afford to pause. This is keeping us afloat." Elias brushed her face lightly, his expression a blend of affection and anxiety. "I get it, but you and the baby come first, way beyond any dessert. I'll handle the remainder today. Just relax, okay?" Imani relented at last, acknowledging she could no longer dismiss her physical warnings. Elias led her to the couch and settled her in snugly. He then headed back to the kitchen, resolved to complete the batch alone. That evening, with Imani recovering, Elias examined the budget and pending commissions. Their venture was expanding beyond expectations, which sparked delight but also highlighted the urgency of balancing the load. Bringing on assistants made perfect sense, though their finances were still mending, leaving little room for big outlays. Come morning, over their shared meal, Imani sipped her herbal brew and fixed Elias with a contemplative gaze. Something's been on my mind, she began. What if we scouted a tiny shop space? A shop, he echoed, glancing up from his reading material. Isn't that jumping the gun a little? Amani beamed, her gaze alight with excitement. Not if we're expanding like this. It won't be premature. We'd gain room to breathe. And with our spot, we could bring in aid for the baking area. Relying only on the apartment won't work once the baby's born. Elias pondered silently for a beat. Owning a storefront had long been their aspiration. But recent turmoil had narrowed his focus to mere endurance. Still, catching Amani's hopeful tone, he sensed that aspiration was nearer than they'd imagined. Thought. You're spot on, Elias agreed, grinning broadly. Let's dive into the search. It'll be tough, but once we spot the perfect spot, we can move ahead. Amani mirrored his grin, a wave of deep relief washing over her. The journey up to that point had been rough, yet suddenly a fresh outlook brimmed with potential. The ensuing weeks buzzed with anticipation and anxiety. Elias managed shipments and kept hunting for suitable sites, while Amani, heavy with her pregnancy, oversaw orders from their home, aided now and then by a kind neighbor pitching in. At last, after endless scouting, they discovered a cozy shopfront in the city center, adjacent to a bustling coffee spot. It was unpretentious, yet equipped with all the essentials. A roomy kitchen, a front counter for customers, and a showcase window to draw in foot traffic. The lease was reasonable, and with some hard work, they were confident they could transform it into a gem. This is it, Amani exclaimed with thrill, wandering the area, picturing the setups and envisioning it stocked with warm pastries. I can picture everything, Elias. It'll feel like our second home. Elias observed her, his heart swelling with admiration and affection. After all the hardships they'd endured, they were crafting their own legacy, something unbreakable. We'll pull it off, Elias vowed, clasping her hand. This marks our fresh beginning. Once the agreement was sealed and the keys secured, the upgrades kicked off. Progress was gradual as they juggled incoming requests alongside readying the venue for launch. Still, day by day, the location evolved, mirroring changes in their world. One evening, as they applied fresh coats to the interior walls, Amani halted, resting her palm on her belly. Seems the little one is thrilled as well, she remarked, beaming. He's kicking up a storm right now. Elias hurried over, laying his hand on her abdomen to sense the gentle flutters. He'll make an outstanding pastry chef. I'd bet on it, he teased, his gaze brimming with tenderness. Amani chuckled, but a brief twinge cut her mirth short. Elias eyed her with concern. Everything okay? She dipped her head, despite the clear discomfort. Probably just him getting comfortable, but we ought to get back and unwind. Elias wasted no time. He recognized how draining the recent stretch had been for them, particularly her. They abandoned the supplies and headed back, aware that amid the tasks ahead, Amani's well-being and the baby's came first. The venture was gaining momentum, their vision advancing, and tomorrow starting to form. Daily, amid obstacles, Amani and Elias grew nearer to their goals. They understood the path had been arduous, but sharing it had rendered them unbreakable. And though echoes of old troubles lingered, the triumphs they forged personally stood as powerful proof that dedication and devotion could surmount the tallest walls. Elias and Amani labored relentlessly to polish the final touches on their upcoming bakery. Launch day loomed near, and while fatigue from extended shifts gripped them, a blend of eagerness and jitters hung in the atmosphere. Their vision of an independent enterprise was on the verge of materializing. Yet the strain to nail every aspect mounted, intensified by the imminent birth. One dawn, as Amani wrapped up arranging the exhibit shelves in the fresh setup, a fierce ache struck her midsection. Initially, she dismissed it as typical expecting mother unease. But this surge was fiercer, and dread crept in. She froze, inhaling steadily and bracing against the surface, hoping the spasm would fade. Elias, stepping inside from checking documents outdoors, caught sight of her hunched over, features strained in agony. "Amani," he queried anxiously, rushing to her side. What happened? She forced a grin to ease his mind, yet the hurt betrayed her. I believe our baby's eager to arrive," she whispered, her tone quivering. A rush of alarm and joy hit Elias simultaneously. He'd anticipated the event soon, but not this abruptly. "Hospital now," he declared firmly, snatching the keys and gently guiding her to her feet. The drive was charged with strain and thrill. Amani focused on measured breaths to remain steady, as Elias gripped the steering wheel with one hand and squeezed hers with the other. He stole glances her way periodically, aiming to confirm her stability, though anxiety knotted his insides, leaving him powerless. At the medical center, the team ushered them in promptly, whisking Amani to the birthing suite. Elias, though on edge, remained glued to her throughout. The stretch that ensued dragged on, wearying them both. Elias had never experienced an overwhelming mix of terror and feeling surge through him. Gripping Amani's hand tightly, Elias caught the strain and agony etched across her features. Yet he also witnessed the remarkable resilience she displayed right then. His respect for his spouse deepened moment by moment. At last, following what felt like an eternity, the infant's wail pierced the heavy quiet in the delivery room. Elias and Imani exchanged glances brimming with joyful tears and ease. The physician raised the newborn, settling her gently against Imani's bosom, and a wave of peace they hadn't known in ages enveloped the space. "A daughter," Elias murmured, his words cracking under the weight of feeling. Imani, worn out yet glowing, gazed at her little one with affection. She caressed the baby's delicate flesh, murmuring endearments while tears streamed along her face. Elias bent closer, wrapping his arms around them, and briefly, everything beyond that room faded away. They formed a complete unit now. Later that day, as Imani dozed with the child cradled close, Elias stepped out for a breath of fresh air. Even amid the elation, he recognized that responsibilities loomed. The bakery stood nearly set for its big debut, though a handful of loose ends needed tying up. Staring through the hospital pane, his mind drifted to his dad, to all he'd abandoned, and how fate had steered them here. The clashes with relatives, the slammed opportunities, the routine battles. It had all paid off to reach this point. Still, his father's presence loomed faintly in the background. He was aware Randall had pulled every trick to sabotage their happiness. Yet what Randall couldn't anticipate was the bond Elias shared with Imani, far mightier than any sway or authority his dad could muster. Uncertainty persisted, though. Had he really escaped his kin's grip? Days following their girl's arrival, whom they called Zuri, a Swahili term for lovely honoring their roots, the bakery's launch day dawned. Imani, mending gradually, oversaw final touches remotely, as Elias and a few trusted pals pitched in to ready the place. Balloons floated, blooms adorned the area, and a straightforward yet heartfelt placard hung by the door. Zuri's signature treats. The debut proved triumphant. Locals nearby, faithful buyers who'd sampled the pastries earlier, plus fresh faces lured by the tempting scents and cozy vibe streamed into the cozy spot. Elias and Imani were dumbfounded. After endless months of toil, effort, and hurdles, their vision had materialized. But amid the celebration and flurry on launch day, Elias spotted a known silhouette slipping in with the crowd. It was Randall, his dad. A twist formed in Elias's gut. He had no clue what to anticipate. No communication had passed between them for ages, and their prior exchange had soured badly. Randall, clad in his flawless attire, edged toward the register, where Elias stood with a stern expression. "Elias," Randall uttered, his tone carrying less command than before. "I came to check on your progress." Elias eyed him, questioning whether this visit stemmed from goodwill or yet another ploy to underscore his supposed shortcomings. "We're doing well, Father," Elias answered steadily, despite the turmoil brewing within. "Your endorsement isn't required." Randall studied him briefly, and for the initial time, Elias detected an unfamiliar glint in those eyes. Fatigue. The patriarch, once the epitome of unyielding dominance, appeared aged and exposed. "That's not my purpose here," Randall confessed, inhaling deeply. "I've reflected a lot. Perhaps I erred. I never imagined you'd advance this much." Elias stood speechless. His dad's admission floored him. He'd battled fiercely to prove his independence, free from the family wealth. Now confronting him, his father appeared ready to concede that point. "Hear me out, Elias," Randall pressed on. "I remain convinced this isn't your ideal route." But his delivery eased, a novelty to Elias's ears. "Still, I must recognize your success. I'm here to offer my best wishes, regardless." Stunned, Elias dipped his head. "Appreciate it, Dad," he managed, at a loss for more. Randall lingered a beat, as though more words hovered on his lips, but ultimately, he pivoted and exited the premises without a backward glance. Elias tracked his departure, a blend of release and bewilderment flooding in. It might not signal the close of their tensions, but at least a faint spark of mending appeared, no matter how modest. Returning to Amani's side, she beamed at him. Zuri nestled securely. "What went down?" she inquired, picking up on his expression. Dad showed up. "To offer congrats," Elias shared, hardly believing it himself. Imani regarded him with astonishment but held her tongue. Instead, she reached out, and as he scooped up their tiny girl, he realized that no matter what lay ahead, no force could ever drive them apart once more. They'd forged a genuine bond, entirely their creation. Soft rays of the morning light filtered through the bakery's windows, casting a warm glow over the glass cases brimming with tempting treats that had turned Zur's specialty desserts into a local hit. It felt like any ordinary day, yet for Elias and Amani, each moment in that cozy spot served as a testament to their shared triumphs, defying every challenge. Zuri, now a few months into her young life, rested in an improvised bassinet at the rear of the store, cooing happily while clutching a tiny stuffed animal. Amani, her expression radiating affection and calm, busied herself in the back room, meticulously icing a personalized cake for one of their loyal patrons. At the front, Elias greeted patrons with a grin that went beyond mere professional pride. It embodied a tranquility he hadn't known in ages. Having weathered his father's ultimatums and those bleak spells of doubt when success seemed impossible, they'd arrived at this haven. They caught each other's gaze and shared a knowing smile, aware that the true victory lay not in the shop's prosperity, but in crafting something authentic, something unbreakable, a household, a sanctuary, and horizons brimming with hope. As the afternoon crowd thinned, Amani settled beside Elias, gently caressing Zuri's tiny fingers, while the baby slumbered soundly. "Recall those initial weeks?" she queried, her smile laced with fond reminiscence. "It all felt so precarious back then, and yet here we stand." Elias inclined his head, those anxious periods vivid in his mind. Endless questions had plagued them, nights lost to worry over whether they'd pull through. Still, he recalled the incremental wins, the instances when progress edged in despite the odds stacked against them. "It demanded effort," Elias responded, clasping Amani's palm. "But the payoff was immense. Each hardship, every barrier. It led us right to this." Amani's eyes met his, spotting the unyielding resolve and passion that had captivated her from the start. Even after the fallout from challenging his kin, he'd harbored no second thoughts. He'd embraced their romance, and that devotion had carried them past the stormiest phases. Occasionally, I ponder alternate paths, Amani mused, her tone thoughtful. What if we'd yielded? If you'd followed your father's demands? Or if the strain had fractured us? Elias gave a subtle shake of his head. Dwelling on hypotheticals isn't for us. Our trials shape this reality, and I'd alter nothing about it. Consider Zuri, he added, gesturing toward their little girl. She validates that our choices were spot on. The ensuing quiet held a profound harmony, a mutual comprehension. Their journey hadn't been smooth, but it was authentically theirs, selected in unison. Then the entrance bell chimed faintly, drawing their attention as Randall, Elias's dad, stepped inside with the measured steps. The electric friction his arrival once sparked was absent now. His features revealed an inner shift. He no longer resembled the figure who'd sought to dictate his son's fate and enforce his vision. Randall neared the register, surveying the space before his gaze lingered on the dozing Zuri. "What a lovely child," he murmured, shattering the hush. "She takes after her mom." Elias shared a brief look with Amani, then affirmed with a nod. Those weren't mere polite words. They signified acknowledgement, an admission Elias had scarcely anticipated. "Thanks, Dad," Elias said, drawing closer. Randall inhaled deeply, as though releasing a long-buried burden. At last, the confession emerged. "I erred gravely, Elias. So many misjudgments," he admitted, his voice carrying unaccustomed fragility. "I convinced myself my way was superior, clouded by ego. Witnessing your accomplishments, the family, this enterprise, it dawns on me that wealth and influence don't eclipse everything." A burden eased from Elias's heart. He'd yearned for that admission forever. Though mending ties wouldn't happen overnight, this marked progress, a move toward healing. "My sole wish was joy with Amani and our child," Elias stated evenly, his words laced with resolve. "I hoped you'd recognize it, grasp its depth." Randall dipped his head, regarding his son with blended remorse and admiration. "I get it at last, and I lament the trials I forced upon you. I'm not seeking favors, just to express my pride in your path." Moisture gathered in Elias's eyes, yet he held steady. He offered his hand, which his father clasped after a brief pause. That modest act signaled the dawn. Something fresh was emerging. Imani, observing the moment unfold, experienced a serenity unlike any she'd known. She understood how heavily Elias had shouldered his dad's rejection for years, and witnessing that modest mending brought essential resolution to them both. Once Randall departed, the store returned to quiet. Yet now, it carried an air of optimism. A fresh start awaited, not just for Elias and Imani, but for the ties to the kin he'd abandoned. "Do you believe it'll be different going forward?" Imi inquired, gently swaying Zuri in her embrace. Elias gazed at her, pausing thoughtfully. "I'm not sure," he admitted frankly. "What matters most is that we're solid, and that stays the same. The rest will unfold in due course." Imani grinned, resting her head against Elias's shoulder, while they admired the fading sun beyond the glass. They'd begun from scratch, enduring the harshest trials imaginable. Yet they'd prevailed, not chasing riches or acclaim, but through unity, fueled by shared affection and faith. Right then, cradling their little one amid their modest enterprise, they realized genuine achievement lay beyond possessions. It was the household they'd forged, a household that, despite every obstacle, thrived, demonstrating how devotion and determination could overcome the toughest hurdles. The days ahead held unknowns, but Elias and Amani were certain that whatever arose, they'd press on side by side. And that stood as their ultimate triumph. Enjoyed the tale. What's the city you're tuning in from? Drop a note in the comments. If the story resonated, show some love with a super thanks to help me craft more tales like this. Grateful for your kind backing. Can't wait to hear your thoughts below. Check out the 2 Fresh Life journeys on screen. I swear they're worth it. Tons more awaits on my channel. Hit subscribe, won't you? Catch you next time for another heartfelt story with warmth and admiration.